Indigenous families, communities, and organizations fought for years for this, and today, the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls is being released. Joining us from Ottawa now with more is Dawn Harvard. She's the president of the Ontario Native Women's Association. Good to have you with us this morning, Dawn.
Good morning.
Prime Minister Trudeau, along with some other federal ministers, is accepting the final report at a ceremony in Quebec. That happens later this morning. What recommendations do you expect to see?
We're really hoping to see a lot of recommendations focusing on addressing the systemic issues. We know that there has been for centuries now very clear discrimination against Indigenous women that has made Indigenous women vulnerable. So when you have an entire system that is making Indigenous women vulnerable, we're really hoping that this inquiry is going to come forward with some strong recommendations to address those needs at the grassroots level to really make a difference in helping Indigenous women be safe because they'll be out of situations of extreme poverty, access to education, housing, and also really hoping for some strong recommendations on the issues of justice and policing. We know throughout this process that many of the families have spoken to the fact that their concerns were not heard, there was no timely response, that justice has not been served in many cases. So we're really hoping for some widespread systemic changes that's going to make a difference.
Over the weekend, the term genocide was attached to this report. There was some objection to that. Does the term genocide fit?
I'm not quoting the report in any way because, of course, we're waiting and out of respect for the families for that report to be released today. But we have been talking for decades now about a centuries-long process of genocide against Indigenous people, of which this crisis really is a symptom of that process. Their attack on Indigenous women has been happening since those first ships came over and our women were being given as rewards to sailors when those first explorers came over. So this is, unfortunately, just the culmination of centuries of genocidal processes against our peoples.
Trying to understand the reasons for the violence, murders, the disappearances of Indigenous women involved hundreds of people. They shared their painful stories, victims' families. What were the main issues that you saw come out of this process?
Well, in terms of the process, I know this has been a process that is something that hasn't ever happened before. So there was a lot of challenges and a lot of learning, I think, that happened throughout the process. But what was really important was that families came first, that we respected the survivors and respected those who chose to participate in the process as well as those who didn't choose to participate for their own reasons. One of the most important things, many of these families wanted answers. And so we're hoping that through this process, through drawing attention to some of these systemic factors, drawing attention to the many ways that the system has put our women in danger, has failed those families, that those changes are going to be made so that those families might have some answers moving forward. There are a large number of questions that remain unanswered, and that families are hoping that they will be getting those answers.
We'll find out, as you mentioned, a little bit later this morning. But as a reminder, the inquiry twice had the deadline extended. It was ultimately allotted $92 million. Will it set up to do what it was intended to do? And do you see any change coming?
Absolutely, I see change coming. The fact that we even had this inquiry is a sign of significant change within Canadian society. Up until, when I was president of the Native Women's Association of Canada, up until the beginning of this inquiry, nobody was willing to address this issue. Nobody was even willing to talk about it. But now that this is out there, now that Canadian society knows what has happened, we can't unlearn that. So we've turned a really pivotal point here in society that people know this can't be swept under the rug anymore, and change is going to happen. What's most important, though, moving forward, is that the government and society recognize and support the work at the grassroots level. We really need to look now at how we work together at the grassroots as service provision, those who are working with survivors, those who are working with the young women in the communities, those who are working with families and child welfare agencies, in order to make sure that we're actually coming together strong for a national action plan to make a difference in a coordinated, strategic way at the grassroots where we really need to change the lives of our women.
Like you, Dawn, we'll be listening closely for that announcement later this morning. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe here.
And you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.